We are live.
Thank you to all who have joined. We are giving a couple more minutes for some people to teeter on in. We are also welcoming the folks on Facebook and the interwebs. So give us a couple of more minutes. We will get a couple more people in here and get this on and popping on this Tuesday night. Tuesday. It is Tuesday. Today is Tuesday. All right, we can go ahead and hop in and start with some introductions and let you guys know about the people and information that we are going to be providing today. I will just go first so I can shut off my mic for a minute because these people are driving crazy. My name is Mel Delvalar. I am the legislative associate here at the ACLU of Missouri. I am out of the Kansas City office. And I do legislation work both in the State House and in the City Council in Kansas City and a little bit in that alderman, the alders over in St. Louis. And Danielle, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Danielle Spradley. I'm the communications associate for the ACLU of Missouri. My pronouns are she, her, and I deal with all of our communications issues. So press releases, op-eds, our social media, our emails, anything communications wise. And I will pop it over to Geneva.
Hi, my name is Geneva, and I use she series pronouns, and I am a public policy intern with the ACLU based in St. Louis. And I'll pass it to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel. I'm also an intern for the public policy department here at the ACLU of Missouri. And I'm also based in St. Louis currently, going to WashU. I'll popcorn to Rianda.
Hey everyone, I'm Rianda. I am the third public policy intern with the ACLU of Missouri. I'm based in Columbia, Missouri. I'll be a senior at Mizzou this fall.
Thank y'all so much. Geneva, you want to hop in and get us starting with introductions?
Yes, so we're going to share our names and our pronouns, where we're from, and how we like our eggs to be our icebreaker. So the team just went around and shared our names. So I'm going to call on Lisa to introduce yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. All right, I'm Lisa Coleman, she, her. Originally, I'm from Hammond, Indiana, but I live in South City now, St. Louis. And I like all kinds of eggs over medium with some buttered toast is the best.
Nice. And then do you want to popcorn it to someone?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on.
If you can't see, then I'll call on Ruth next.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Ruth Lee, and I live in St. Louis, and I guess I'm she, hers, although I think we should all just use they, and then we wouldn't have to bother with all this. I like my eggs over easy on top of hash browns.
Nice. And then Kendall, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone, and good evening. I'm Kendall Martinez Wright. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Palmyra, Missouri, and I prefer my eggs either scrambled or omelet style.
Nice. And then Representative Manlove, do you want to go?
Sorry, I don't know how to work Zoom. Everybody, I'm Ashley. She, her pronouns, I guess. From Kansas City. I prefer my eggs non-existent because I don't eat chicken periods, and I even use flaxseed as a binder now. Thanks.
That's a fair point. And then I don't think the team shared our eggs, but I like poached the best, followed by scrambled. And then Rihanna, do you want to share what type of eggs you like?
Over hard, but preferably on a breakfast sandwich.
Danielle, do you want to go?
Yes, I prefer mine over easy, but also on a sandwich. I don't like just eating plain eggs.
Yeah. And then Rachel?
And an omelet with some spinach and cheese.
Nice. And last but not least, but Mo?
On a croissant, an omelet, and some fried rice with some sort of starch and cheese.
Now I want to eat eggs, even though I already had some today. All right, next slide. So what is an op-ed? An op-ed is unique in that it's not just an article that necessarily has been written by someone on the staff of the newspaper, and it's not something that's supposed to be necessarily unbiased. It is an opinion piece. So as you can see here, it's a column that represents the strong, informed, and focused opinion of the writer on an issue of relevance to a targeted audience. So we're going to be writing opinion pieces on events and legislation in Missouri, and taking a stance on them, taking a position. And they're not very long. They're usually about 500 words. And sometimes papers are willing to edit them down for you, but honestly, we just want to submit them at the right length. And they have a clearly defined point. They have a clear stance on what that point is and where you stand on it. And it's just to have your voice and be unique, because the op-ed is supposed to be, something that comes from the people. It's not just, like the editorial board or staff writers. It's you, it's the community, and you're almost in a way representing the voice of the community. And we have another person who's joining us. Hello, Scott, can you hear us?
Hello, yes.
Okay, hi. And my name's Geneva. I'm a policy intern with the ACLU. I use she, series pronouns, and I'm from St. Louis. And this is only the first slide, so you're not missing out on much. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Scott Campus, he, him from St. Louis. I work with Privacy Watch, which the ACLU is a member of, among other things.
Oh, were you at the Earthbound event last week?
Unfortunately not. I was really looking forward to it, but I couldn't make it. Something came up.
It's okay. Well, I'll see you at the next one. But yeah, we just remember what an op-ed is. And essentially it's just a piece that is written by the people rather than necessarily someone on staff, and it takes a stance or an opinion on an issue. And we can do the next slide. So when you're writing an op-ed, make sure you reread and edit. And oh, I think this might be out of order, but yeah, make sure that when you're writing that you reread and edit your piece. Yeah, it's fine. And then you can always contact our communications associate for help as well, in case you would like her to edit it or offer any pointers. So that's Danielle, who's on this call and who you met, and that is her contact information there. And we want to err on the side of being persuasive over divisive. So we're trying to gather support from all across the aisle, because that's what we're trying to do with these op-eds, is build power and not just show, hey, this is the stance that is the what legislators should be listening to. We want people who are reading it, like everyday people in our community, to think, oh, this is something that I might serve my interests as well, or might connect with my values. So rather than just being like, oh my gosh, this issue is obviously the only answer, we want to try to explain our stance and why, hey, like this is something that's really important to you, why it's going to affect you, your family, and your loved ones. So we're really going for unity in almost all cases. That being said, if it's a really egregious matter, like, I mean, in that case, it's, you know, the right call to condemn. Like, I would say probably January 6th, that's something that you can take a clear stance on. Whereas other things, you know, you want to really like bring people together in your article. Next slide. And so why do we write op-eds? So again, one of the main things is that we want to bring people together over an issue. You know, you want to explain why, oh yes, this tax abatement is not going to be a good idea for our community, and here is why it's going to affect all of us. And then you explain to, you know, people who might not otherwise be informed that this issue matters for this reason. And in addition to reaching out to the other people in our state and communities, these are read by elected officials. And when they see a lot of op-eds being published in which, you know, they're coming out strongly on this one stance, they might seem to think, okay, this is what my constituents are saying, and I got to listen, maybe I should vote this way. And this also brings up information not addressed in a news article necessarily, because you were the author. You can select what information that might have been omitted by news sources. You can add that in there. And we can also create an impression of widespread support for opposition or support for an issue. And again, this offers a local, like, average person's take on why these matters are important. I mean, a lot of times the people who get to make statements are people in positions of power, like legislators or members of the press. And this is a way that, you know, you, me, my mom, like anyone can show that, hey, like this is how this is affecting Missourians. So as you can see in the graphic, we're trying to get these people's attention, Missourians and people at the Capitol. And then, yeah, move on to the next slide.
Great. So now we're going to kind of walk through an example of a really standout op-ed. I just want to give everyone about a minute or so to read over this op-ed, and then we can talk about it.
Do we have a link to the full op-ed in the chat? Because I have one if I need to drop it in the chat.
That would be great. Thank you.
Here we go. I'm going to drop it in the chat now.
And as many of you have some background on this issue, obviously this op-ed is about, you know, the anti-trans bills and legislation that have been introduced in our state house. So, you know, there are a lot of issues for you to be able to care about and jump in and get your opinion on. This example here is the anti-trans bills that were being introduced last year.
And this was written by Brandon Boulware and another father of a trans child. And some of you, I'm sure, have seen the Brandon Boulware testimony that went viral. Just really strong writing skills as well.
And something we will be revisiting next week on our testimony training. Hope to see you there. Thank you. Ready to move on there, Rachel?
Absolutely. So if you haven't had a full chance to read this testimony, hopefully you will have a chance right after this, but just wanted to highlight why this op-ed, why this op-ed works so well is that it really starts off with a pretty kicking line here that's going to grab your attention if you're just kind of perusing the newspaper. It's going to make you want to kind of read more. It really goes through their own experiences to really make you think of a personal story. You understand where they're coming from without even knowing that much about them. But it also, you know, makes you care about an issue that maybe perhaps before you didn't have a personal connection to. So it's kind of giving you that insight, giving you that overview and that perspective. You'll also notice it's not very convoluted. Everything here is pretty simple phrases, simple words, some shorter sentences, some varied. So it really makes it interesting to read. But it also doesn't go above anyone's head. So I think that is something that's really strong, and the level of emotion, because it is such a personal topic for these two fathers, but it also is a topic that, you know, faces a lot of pushback. So that mix is really strong here. So we'll be talking more about things to focus on when writing your own op-eds, but we want to kind of set the stage and show you one really successful piece that we have seen. Moving along. When writing an op-ed, it's best to begin with the story. You really want to hook those readers. They want to know why you're writing. Like Geneva was talking about, the beauty of op-eds is that anyone can sit down and pen one, and the reader is going to want to know why you chose to do so. So definitely begin with the story and then move into the larger picture, the legislation that's being discussed. And when you sit down to write, make sure to outline your paragraphs and arguments. 500 words may seem like a lot, but it goes by pretty quick for something that's personal. So you want to make sure that you hit all of those key points of your own story and the legislation being discussed and what prompted you to write. The letter should overall be formal. This is being published. This is something that your name will be on, and it certainly is different style than maybe a tweet or an email, but it's certainly something that you want to grab attention with. As you can see in the other piece, they certainly did a great job of grabbing attention while keeping the tone pretty professional yet personal. And then of course, just hit home at the end. You want the reader to come away with that takeaway from your 500 words. So definitely have a strong conclusion to end out the piece. And with that, Rihanna is going to talk about one topic that there's certainly lots of room for op-ed writing on.
Hey everyone. So as of recently, the Missouri legislature has taken an attempt to censor discussions of race and race relations in Missouri classrooms, including critical race theory and the 1619 Project. So on the screen, there's a little background about those two issues. CRT is an academic concept that essentially recognizes that systematic racism is ingrained in our American society, and it examines how our systems promote inequality. And the 1619 Project aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the center of our nation's history. So the attempts that the Missouri legislature has taken, you can go to the next slide, Rachel, if you want. So in the 2021 session, the body proposed several pieces of legislation banning the use of critical race theory or works like the 1619 Project because of their so-called divisive teachings about our nation's past. These bills got several hearings and were brought up as amendments on other bills. So with this background that they have built, it may be easier to pass bills and amendments like this next session. These proposed bans set back the progress that's been made in addressing systematic racism in our country. And not to mention, in a recent report administered by DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Missouri, found that out of 400 Missouri school districts, only the Kansas City Public Schools and 2 other school districts in the state actually use critical race theory and the 1619 Project in their curriculum. Despite the claims that these concepts are divisive and harmful ideologies, they educate individuals on systematic barriers and discrimination in our nation's history and today. And by preventing us and Missourians from engaging in these conversations, lawmakers are essentially seeking to silence individuals and educators, and this harms and erases the legacy of discrimination experienced by so many different minorities. So this is a very up and coming issue in our state and around the nation, and in a lot of states, their legislators are trying to get rid of these discussions. So I know recently we were talking about writing. Personally, I was writing in the works of writing an op-ed about CRT, and like Rachel said, this is a great issue, an up and coming issue to write your op-ed on. And so we're going to go into an activity soon, and we're going to split up into 2 groups. And so you could consider using critical race theory as your op-ed topic, or feel free to use any other issue. But Rachel, do you want to break down the different parts of the op-ed in this little activity?
Yes, thank you, Rianda. Yes, so for the activity today, you'll be thinking with your group about different sections of the op-ed. So for the intro, think about why you would want to write about this topic. Are you maybe a parent of a student in the Missouri school system? Are you an educator? Are you someone that underwent Missouri education and maybe have that kind of tie? Or you're just someone that's really passionate about the issue? You can think about those. You can think about the narrative. If someone in the group has a tie to the story, or if you just can maybe even walk the reader through what that experience might be like for a student, or you can really get creative with the narrative there. But just maybe with your group, you can think over kind of the arc of your op-ed and how that would look. Educate. I know this may be tricky with the limited time frame here, but in a regular op-ed, you would want to take some time to either jot statistics, any organizations that have done work. You could refer to a different state that has done something similar to what you're proposing. And then finally, for the conclusion, you're going to want to reiterate that main point, hit home, and make sure that everything kind of ties together nicely. And so for this, Mo, I'm not sure how much time we're thinking here.
Yeah, I am splitting people off in the rooms now. We're going to spend. Go ahead.
Sorry, can I ask a couple of questions before we do that?
Absolutely, please go right ahead.
So I guess I didn't pay close enough attention to the topic of this, and I, for some reason, thought it was about writing letters to the editor. Can you briefly explain, other than length, what the difference is between a letter to the editor and an op-ed? And also, my experience reading the St. Louis Post-Dispatch is that there aren't that many op-eds from just random individuals. They almost always are from, you know, people who have an organization. They list an organization, or, you know, there's some context for why they were writing the op-ed. Honestly, I'm having trouble understanding how I, as just a random individual, would ever manage to get an op-ed in the paper.
So I'm going to answer that. Hi, Danielle here. DPD will not even respond to me. I'm going to be the PD editorial board will not even respond to myself. You actually have a better chance, and this is actually a common problem with the editorial board of the Post-Dispatch. They are very different than most editorial boards. So when I speak on this issue, this is not the same as all the other editorial boards in the state. I can't even get a response as an organization from the editor of the St. Louis editorial board. They chose. Now, I do have better luck when I have an individual themselves submit it to the PD editorial board. It does have a bigger chance of actually getting in there.
For example, the Brandon one.
I don't know that. I mean, I don't recall seeing any that just were individuals without some sort of organization listed after their name.
Well, like in the Brandon one, we help people get their thoughts and things organized. And then like a couple of the back end slides will show some places where we have had better relationships with the ability to get op-eds in. And I truly don't want you to underestimate the ability of an individual to get that information out, because it does truly work. For a number of places, we do have issues, like Danielle said, with some other periodicals that want an organization or want some other sort of name behind it. But we have found success in getting just regular everyday people who have us as their support, but don't necessarily have us as their backing organization.
Yeah, and they do that. It is less so as much on the Post-Dispatch, but they do take opinion editorials from people that are not on their board, and letters to the editors. And the op-eds and letters to the editors can kind of go succinctly, and they do take them from people that are not on their editorial board. I have seen them from the PD. I know that I've given out the information to people to contact the PD editorial board, and they have been published. We had 2 people who contacted us who wanted to discuss an issue on the trans justice issue, and both of theirs were published by the Post-Dispatch in the past year. So it does happen. It absolutely does happen. It depends if it's a subject they decide they want to pick up on. Now, part of this is if you're not getting a response from the PD editorial board, go to the Riverfront Times, go to the St. Louis Beacon, go to the St. Louis American. There are other papers in the city that will pick up your editorial letters and pieces. We have seen success with individuals, actually more so success with individuals going to the PD editorial board than our organization itself. In all honesty.
No, I'm not right. I understand they might be reluctant to publish something from the ACLU. I'm just saying there always seems like they're with a university or they're with some other nonprofit, or I don't know, they're just always seem to be with some organization. But can you also address the issue about the difference between a letter to the editor versus an op-ed? I mean, why not just do letters to the editor, I guess is my question.
They're one and the same. So they can be one and the same. Like a lot of times a letter to the editor is a lot of times a response to what an opinion editorial board said, right? So most of the time, the way a letter to the editor goes is they're responding to something the editorial board already published. With an op-ed, you're bringing in this cold piece about an issue you care about and bringing it up to the paper for them to write about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. I hope that answered your question. And I hope we can obviously keep diving into that. And this isn't just specific to CRT. It's just this is one of the issues that have been brought up in our state house and something that they keep debating back and forth. These principles apply to any issue. You know, you have to grab attention. You have to speak on your own experiences and communities. You know, sometimes as an organization, we've got an op-ed into the Kansas City Star and other smaller rural areas. So there are a lot of options out there that may not necessarily be the biggest one in the city, but I'm going to split us off real quick and just have a quick conversation about the CRT bit. If you could put that slide back up, just have a couple conversations about how we would address this, how you would address this as a potential person who writes an op-ed. So let me mute myself and start separating people out, and then we'll be back about 5 minutes. Did it work? Is everyone still here? Can you all still see me? I have you in rooms. Why is it not?
Yeah, I can see you.
Did it tell you to go to a room?
No, I saw a slide and I was reading it and then the slides changed and then you popped back up.
Here I am. Let me try again.
If we can't get into 2 separate groups, I also feel like this is a small enough amount of people to where we could go around, or we could start with the staff and
I did it.
Looks
Welcome
like
back. Yeah. Rachel, are you able to pop up that screen one more time? And then I just would ask for a person or two, or whoever wants to pop up with any conversations that were had in the breakout rooms. We would be more than happy to have a little bit of that discussion about what y'all were talking about in those rooms. Can I ask Rachel to kind of pick that up and potentially maybe grab someone from your group?
Absolutely. Our group had a great discussion about different ideas. Ruth, would you feel comfortable sharing what you were thinking?
Well, I was just trying to think of what my personal angle would be, and I said that I thought I would think about something I had been taught in school that would kind of be parallel, as in under the category, that people are saying this is opinionated history. Well, there were loads of things we were taught in school that were opinionated history. And I would try to think of an example of that and say, well, this is what I was taught in school. How is this any different? If you want to call it opinion. But anyway, that was just one thought.
anyone else?
I I pointed out how in our group my reasoning for being a proponent of CRT because, or quote unquote CRT, because CRT is not only a fictitious political point that is being widespread around not only in Missouri, but in the nation, but how points of American history that technically represents various communities are being showcased, and also how, as a product of an educator with my mother being a teacher, as well as other family members being educators, ranging from elementary to secondary, or even university. I wanted to hit on that, as well as hit on the rural aspects of why it's vital for these teachings.
Yeah, absolutely. Did anybody else want to share how they would have approached an op-ed on this issue?
I said, I don't know if I'm way more in the body, but maybe give some historical context. I think people don't, people just think these are names, and they don't realize the humanity attached to it. So maybe giving historical context. I also noticed, like right now, a lot of the generation below the millennials, they don't realize that we have a plague like every 10 years. So they don't realize that this is like a thing that we regularly go through and we regularly conquer. So maybe historical context in some part of the body.
Yeah. And that's so to what Representative Manlum's point was about, like, people not having context, and to like people not understanding names, like especially one of the reasons op-eds and letters to the editor are so powerful is because it also puts a name and a person who is affected by a situation to an issue. Because a lot of times, like, we know when we're working on issues and these bills and all this legislation that can be really complicated, and if it doesn't really affect someone, they don't understand why it matters. And so the importance in these is showing why these issues matter to people in your community and why it should matter to everyone in the community, because it does affect people. And that's the power in writing these and sharing your personal stories and sharing historical context. As someone earlier stated about, well, I was taught in schools opinions as well, like bringing up that historical context and your experience so that there are other people that can relate to that. Or storytelling is just powerful in general. And if you can bring someone to have empathy to a situation or look at it in a more personal lens, they're more likely to care about an issue than if it's just being explained to them in this complicated technocratic way of here's this legislation. People kind of, if there's not a story behind it, people kind of, their eyes start to glass over a lot of times. So it's just a really effective tool for communicating in that way.
There's so many people out there who, if it doesn't affect them, they don't care. So even if you do put a face or a name to it, if they don't think they're being affected, then they're not going to listen. So if there's a way you can incorporate how it affects, the broader society, or, random Joe American, that would be something I would try to work in there as well. How is our society being hurt overall by the freak out over CRT?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and that's right. Exactly. That's exactly right. So I know Mo has some things to discuss briefly, so I'm going to kick it over to Mo and then we'll move on.
I actually think we're ready to thank you everyone for your comments and your participation and your conversations. A lot of the fights that we have in Missouri, we're on the forefront of, and a lot of it can get kind of crazy. So, having the CRT conversation is important right now, but it's just as important, and we could have held just the same conversation with the anti-CRT or anti-trans bills, with the voting bills that they have coming up, some of the criminal justice issues. So we are grateful to have this conversation. I think we're ready to move on to the next slide, where I think Danielle is going to talk about some of those concerns that were brought up earlier by Ruth about where some of these things can be submitted, where we've had success in the past. And I will hush now because these roofers do not want me to be great.
Right. So one of the best ways, and honestly, your best, wherever you are located, if there is a local paper, your best chance of getting an op-ed in or a letter to the editor in is your closest local paper. For the larger ones, and I've created, and I'm going to drop that in the chat as well. Let me get this. And so we've created sort of a resource here with all the information you need to know, that has a lot of the papers in Missouri that you can submit to. So what you're going to do when you're first submitting is you're going to want to make sure that you submit to the editor. You always also want to submit a photo and a short bio. That is one thing that helps it get in quicker. They realize that you're serious, you're organized, you're probably going to get on their nerves. So, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but that is a lot of ways to push an editor, is to show them that you know what you're doing. So when you submit, like, one thing you do want to submit is a small photo and a small bio, so they understand, like, you're a member of the community, why you're here, why you're writing about this. So you open up your email to the editor explaining, like, why you've written this, why it's important to you, and why you're submitting to this particular paper. One thing that does have issue in Missouri is, as far as papers go, dual bylines are really hard to get published. So although the op-ed we showed you was a dual byline where it was written between two parents, a lot of newspapers will not do that. So your best bet is to write an editorial as yourself. That op-ed we showed you, I had to shop it to 4 different papers to get it published because they did not want to publish a dual byline. So that is one thing. Always submitting by yourself is better to do. As far as that's really, like, and there's links in what I've just sent you, and I can always send you more papers. And if you ever need help finding a paper you want to submit to, you're not getting a response from an editor, and it's an issue you're really, really feel is important is I can try to help you place your op-ed. We do that. So you can always contact me and give me a call, and I can help you do that to get it in there. But the Post-Dispatch, the RFT, St. Louis American is pretty great about publishing op-eds. The Missouri Times, Lisa, you had a question.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt you. Please finish and then I'll ask.
So, okay, the Missouri Times, especially if you are trying to get to the legislators and you want the legislators to hear your story, your best bet, in all honesty, is to get it in the Missouri Times, because all the legislators read that paper. If you're really wanting to get your community voice out and you're not targeting the legislators specifically and you want to rile up the community, your best bet is going to the KC Star, the Post-Dispatch. The Riverfront Times is going to get a lot of pickup, and usually gets a lot of attention on social media. The Springfield Newsleader. But staying local, if you're just trying to talk to the community and bring them forth on issue, is usually your best bet. Targeting legislators, Missouri Times is always a good bet.
I just wanted to drop, we have a couple of our interns are in college, and so it's always appropriate to see if your kids who are in college, if that's, or, you know, neighbors, cousins, aunts, neighbors, cousins, nieces, nephews, people that are in some of these areas that maybe you wouldn't reach normally in a Columbia or in a Springfield or in some of the smaller college towns. They too have places where you can post these things or have conversations with people in that area who may be interested in that as well. I'm sorry, Lisa, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, are you guys gonna want to have a letter writing campaign about certain issues, like where you're gonna send something out to all the ACLU supporters and say, please write letters on whatever topic, or are you just kind of hoping we do whatever on our own?
Not a bad idea, Lisa. We have a number of things that we do for a variety of topics, right? And like part of the CRT thing, we're gathering stories and conversations from people who lived through, my dad rode on segregated buses. It's not that far away from us in history that we can't touch it still. And that's some of the stuff that they want to erase in our history. So, that's a campaign for that. But the same logic and strategy exists for overall issues. I don't know that we would say everyone write a letter on this specific issue, especially because we cover so many issues. But I don't know if you have another point that you wanted to make on that, Danielle.
Well, we have done things like that before. And when we get closer to legislative time, that's one thing we always ask people to do. Is if there's an issue that like you really care about and we are pumping it up on our social medias, we are sending out emails about it, we always try to do a legislative letter writing campaign and also get people to write letters to the editor. So I think that is something like we could definitely put specific calls out to and ask for as well. And yeah,
happy to hear of the interest from people who would be willing and maybe able to do some of that work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a good idea and something moving into this next legislative session, we'll see what they decide to focus on. And then we can talk about like the issues that we want to have people really bringing to attention and bringing their opinions into it and fighting. We've got to see first, like, we know right now with the CRT during the interim, they're holding town halls and holding meetings and not allowing everyone to testify. So those are issues that we're bringing up because it is an issue at the moment. But we always encourage people to write letters to the editors during legislative session, especially.
All right, thank you.
And we are blessed to have a representative and hopefully a future representative in Kendall. I don't know if it's too much to ask if there is anything in specific that catches your attention. I know a lot of representatives send out literature to try to hear back from their constituents, but is there any other way that this information can get to y'all? Do these op-eds, get people talking?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I'm so sorry.
How do we get to our reps? We're talking about how we get this information out to the public, and in a couple of places where when we post our op-eds, sometimes the legislature reads them. But I also know that representatives have their own literature that they are able to get out, to get information back from their constituents. Is there anything in specific that you think works to get either your attention or the attention of your colleagues in the State House?
Emails and letters work, especially when they come from a constituent or direct somebody in my district. I tend to focus on those. I try to tally them all, but I focus on those the most. We do read the newspapers a lot. Normally there's a scan, we do a quick scan of it, or it'll come across as a headline if you're following the newspaper on a social media platform. Outside of that, I guess the Delta variant is back up and running, but otherwise I would encourage everybody to just show up and let your legislator know that you are involved and you're paying attention. And most of us will receive that well.
Thank you. And she actually brought up a great point. On the back end, we will help you with social media, for example. If you get the op-ed posted, we can, post that on our social medias, which have a pretty good following, and help push that message even further out beyond just the newspaper. As we know, it's a digital world now, so we can try to reach people in as many corners as we can. Danielle, anything else on this side?
Nope, I think that's good.
Like we said, college towns, other smaller places where there are large gatherings of people is a great place to try to get this recognized by local newspapers. So opening this up to questions. I know we scheduled this to 7:30, but we just had enough time for questions, and we won't hold you any longer than those questions will take. So if anyone has anything else, despite the many great questions that have been brought up already, thank you so much, Ruth, Lisa, and Scott.
Hey, this is Kendall, and
Hey, Kendall.
I do have one question. So I know for sure in smaller communities and rural communities, it might take a little longer. So do you think that, so if I was to write an op-ed, should I also consider possibly just doing a few additional newsprint outlets, such as a statewide news outlet, or even a medium-sized media outlet?
I would say if you don't get a response from an editor within 2 to 3 days, I would do a follow-up, but then I would also pitch to a different paper. So that's one thing I do in my practice. If I'm not getting a response from the editor, I'm going to go pitch it to another paper and see who bites, right? And it never hurts to go to the bigger one. A lot of times they will ask you if you've submitted it other places. So you got to be careful, because what you don't want to have happen is you submitted it to one, and then you submit it to a bunch of others, but then the other is asking you if you've only exclusively submitted it to other papers. So what I usually do is submit. If I don't hear anything within 2-3 days, I follow back up with the editor. If I either, and depending on the response or no response, then within 24 hours, I'll go pitch to another paper.
Okay, thank you so much, Danielle.
No problem.
Great question, Kendall. Thank you so much. Ruth?
Sorry, can you, I forgive my ignorance, but I've never seen the Missouri Times. Where is it?
So it's a very specific paper, and it's targeted to the legislature and the people that watch the legislature. It's online. You can order it as well. It's actually, if you want to keep up to date on what's going on in the legislature, it's actually a good paper to read. So you can follow them on social media, Facebook, all of that. It is also a actual printed out edition that does get delivered to people's doors. And it is hyper focused on the Missouri legislature and governing. And the reason it's gonna-
Politics in general on the
Yeah.
that state level.
right.
Is-
So
is it
state
deli-
level,
Is
I'm sorry.
delivery mainly in the capital, or is it really printed and delivered statewide, or is it?
I'm pretty sure you can get it delivered to your home. Don't quote me on that. If you want, I can, if you drop your email in the chat, I can
No,
send.
I can look it up. I was just curious.
I've posted the website online. It's run by a well-known Republican figure in the state who is also respected across political lines as far as his opinion and the ability to get this information out. Mo Times is also one of the few newspapers that will be there all night long for a filibuster, for example, and will give you a play-by-play on the last week of what's happening, like actions, every single bill. They are very hyper-focused on the state house. I know that they print it and give it out in Jeff. I know that they're also local to Jeff, but also to the southern, more rural regions of Missouri is where they're coming out of.
Okay,
Scott Fawn, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, Scott Fawn. So regardless of how you feel specifically about Scott Fawn, how they feel about Scott Fawn is more important. And the fact that your words can be heard through his paper and can be truly heard by legislators because they listen to him is a part of that pitch for that.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it just actually really is a good, especially if you follow them on Twitter, if you follow their editor, Caitlin Scalehorn on Twitter. She is up to the minute when the Senate is going on and on and on and filibusters and going on all night. You're going to get up to date information about what is going on in the state house. So they are a good, if you're concerned with what's going on in Missouri politics, they are good people to follow. And yes, they also have a podcast. Thank you, Rihanna.
Cognizant of time and this freaking roof that just refuses to help me. Does anyone have any other questions, concerns? I will pitch right now. We will have testimony training next week. Testimony to me is the most exciting part of my job because I get to go to legislators and yell at their faces directly with stats and information, and I absolutely love it. And you should love it too. Given the COVID restrictions, the Delta variant, and the mask mandates that are coming, thankfully last year we were able to get some virtual testimony going, specifically in the House. So that'll be a piece of interest, hopefully, for all of you if you have something that you want to testify on. Again, you don't have to come in person necessarily next year, and there will be opportunities to do so virtually. So with that, Danielle says thank you to Scott, and we will add your piece to our guide for resources. Obviously, you can reach out to any of us with questions. We hope to see you next week. We hope that you invite some others, and we'll keep moving this train forward. I thank you so much for your time on a Tuesday. Again, we hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you,
much.
y'all.
All right.
Thank you guys. It was so nice meeting you and seeing you.
Thanks.